everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about 1983's The Dead Zone, directed by David Cronenberg, and its new 4K Blu-ray that is coming out on December 19, 2023 from Scream Factory. So The Dead Zone was released in 1983, celebrating 40 years, directed by David Cronenberg. It stars Christopher Walken, Brooke Adams, Tom Skerritt, and Martin Sheen, and other great actors also pop up in this movie. And this is one of those David Cronenberg films that I think is very, very underrated. David Cronenberg is most known for his body horror films like Videodrome, The Fly, Scanners, Existence, Crimes of the Future from last year, but he also makes other films as well, others that don't rely on body horror and really tell compelling stories. And this one is based on a 1979 Stephen King novel. It tells the story of Johnny Smith, played by Christopher Walken, who at the beginning of this movie gets in a car accident, falls into a 5-year coma, and when he wakes up, he finds out that his girlfriend has been remarried, she's got a son now, he's lost his job, his whole life has been flipped upside down, but he's also inherited some psychic abilities. If he touches a certain person, he can see their future, what's going to happen, and really these psychic abilities show stuff that he can possibly intervene and change the future, something that's going to be really negative. He could actually end up preventing it from happening as long as he intervenes on it. And this actually does catch the eye of a lot of people in town, including Tom Skerritt's sheriff. Well, I really love Tom Skerritt. Tom Skerritt is one of those actors, a big-time character actor, popping up in movies like Alien, Top Gun, Steel Magnolias. He really is a very compelling actor, and I always felt like what Tom Skerritt brings to the table is compassion. I always felt like he was a very compassionate guy. Even in movies like Top Gun, you know, that's the guy that Tom Cruise goes to talk to, and it always feels like he's an honest, caring individual. Tom Skerritt always plays that. He's just got this very soft-speaking voice, and I think it works really well in this movie. You know, he could play an asshole sheriff who's like, who is this freak show? But he's like, no, let's try and use him to help us catch a serial killer that's killing people in town. Maybe he could help us. Even though a lot of people probably wouldn't believe somebody like this, but he's like, you know what? Maybe he could bring something to the table. And, you know, a lot of people in this town of Castle Rock, Maine, because it is based on a Stephen King novel, and Stephen King loves to head back to Castle Rock, even though it's not a real town. And this film was actually filmed in Toronto, and it shows. It looks a lot like other David Cronenberg films. It looks just like Videodrome from a couple of years earlier, and it will look like a lot of future David Cronenberg films, mainly because David Cronenberg is from Canada. He likes to shoot up there, and honestly, that cold setting is something that I always fall in love with. I love it when there's snow on the ground in the movies, when everybody looks like they're freezing. It's probably shitty for the actors, but for me, watching the movie, I absolutely just love that setting. They have so many great shots throughout this film, but just the snow on the ground, guys breathing, and you can see their breath, you know, they're wearing the coats. It just really captures that wintry setting perfectly, and the movie itself is just very compelling. It's telling a very interesting story. Now, I don't think that this is a flawless film. They went for a certain story structure where it kind of feels like a book, where they're telling chapters of this man's life. When he first comes out of the coma, we have to see him regrouping, relearning how to live life, and then he gets approached by Tom Skerritt's sheriff, and they ask him to help search for a serial killer. Now, that could have been the rest of the movie, but we kind of close out that chapter pretty fast, and he ends up going to work with a guy, helping his son, teaching his son, who's a very shy kid.
Now, don't give me any argument. The ice is gonna break!
He ends up going there, helping him out, and then we move off that pretty fast until we eventually end up at Martin Sheen's character, who's running for senator in this movie, and he's playing this character so over the top. Martin Sheen looks like he's having the time of his life.
And ever since, and those people spent that money with a clear conscience.
And it's funny because he's kind of playing this asshole politician in this movie, and then eventually he ends up playing the president on The West Wing, which is a very different character from this, just showing the range of Martin Sheen, a very underappreciated actor as well. You know, maybe not back in the 70s and 80s, but when we talk about Martin Sheen now, a lot of people probably just know him as the dad of Emilio Estevez and Charlie Sheen, but he is a damn good actor himself, and you could just tell he had a ball with this role. And honestly, the political storyline in this movie is very relevant in today's culture, so it's pretty funny to see it back here 40 years ago being drawn into this story. But again, it's just one chapter. The way they structure the story, it's kind of just structured very linearly. I really think there was a better story structure, maybe possibly telling it non-linearly. I think it would have worked better for the film. It just feels like we kind of built characters up just to break them down way too quick, in my opinion. And I think that's, you know, bringing a novel to the big screen. I feel like in 2023, this film would actually be a limited series of about 6 to 8 episodes. I think that's where they would tell this story, like have each episode have about an hour concentrating on these chapters. I assume they're chapters in the book because I've honestly never read The Dead Zone, but it just feels like that from the story structure of the film. And it just doesn't always work for me. Now, Christopher Walken does work perfectly in this movie. This is Christopher Walken before he becomes a caricature of himself in the 1990s.
Your daughter's running on the wet kitchen floor. She's leaving footprints. The housekeeper's annoyed. She has to do that part of the floor over. It's not too late. You can call her.
He's still Academy Award winning Christopher Walken here, really giving a great emotional performance. You really do care about his character of Johnny and what the poor guy has had to go through. It kind of reminded me of what Tom Hanks' character had to go through in Castaway. He did nothing wrong. He got in a car accident in this movie. He comes back to life. When he fell asleep and went into that coma, his life seemed pretty damn good. He wakes up. For him, it just felt like a nap, and his whole life has been flipped upside down. And you could just feel that in him. And I feel like Christopher Walken, no matter what he's doing in this movie, you could just feel that pain behind his eyes, behind his voice, that he's just struggling to get through his day-to-day life, and he just wants to find a purpose. And unfortunately, even if he doesn't want this power is the only thing that's going to guide him through the rest of his life and actually make him feel important again. So I really do think that they told a very compelling story. And another thing that I like and dislike is the score. The score is done very well for this movie, but there are points in the movie where I think a little bit of a slowed down, more reserved score would have helped this one out a little bit, where the whole score throughout the entire film feels a little bit too bombastic and overwhelming at points, and it just doesn't fit the tone of the scene. Now, there are some very, very scary scenes in this movie, surprisingly, and David Cronenberg is the guy for that. And those scenes actually do fit great into this movie. It really does feel like it's kind of balancing tones very, very well. But the score of this kind of doesn't match some of those scenes very well. So those are some of my issues with the film. I don't think it's a perfect David Cronenberg film. It's not one of my personal favorites, but it is one that I like to go back to every 2 to 3 years because I do get wrapped up in the story of it all. And I also really like to watch Christopher Walken and Tom Skerritt's performance in this movie. So even if you haven't seen this movie and you want to catch up on all your David Cronenberg films or all of your films based on Stephen King novels, this is definitely one you should check out. I definitely think it's worth your time, even if you don't want to check out the Scream Factory 4K Blu-ray that we're going to talk about right now.
Mr. Secretary, the missiles are flying.
Well, here it is, the Scream Factory 4K Blu-ray of The Dead Zone. This is going to be released on December 19, 2023, and Scream Factory had previously actually put out a Blu-ray of this, I think back in 2021, but this is a brand new 2023 scan of the camera negative, so it's not the previous scan added with HDR or Dolby Vision over it. It's actually a brand new scan, and that's really the only thing that you're going to be getting new in here is the new visual scan, because the audio tracks, the DTS HD 5.1 and the 2.0 will carry over from the previous releases. Same thing with most of the extras. All you get as far as new extras go is the brand new audio commentary track that does feature Mike Flanagan on it. And Mike Flanagan, I've said it before and I'll say it again, is one of the greatest working horror directors today. I love everything the guy does. So that's pretty damn cool. And if you're an audio commentary track fan, there are actually 4 of them on here. So you're going to definitely get spoiled with audio commentary tracks, which is pretty damn cool. But before I get ahead of myself, let's look at the packaging here. You get standard Scream Factory packaging. You get the poster on the front. You slide it off. It does not have reversible cover art. This is it. So there's no reversible cover art on this one. When you come inside, you get 1 4K disc, 1 Blu-ray disc. All of your extras are going to be on that Blu-ray disc. And all the extras, like I said, are previously released extras. There's just a bunch of featurettes, interviews on here, all done very, very well. I don't want to sell them short. You could definitely paint a pretty broad picture about how this movie was made and how everyone was feeling going into it after it was made. You could definitely get all of that from the featurettes. You definitely could have edited it together into one nice, big, long documentary, but I still really appreciate them giving us as many extras as they did. We didn't really get any new extras except for that new audio commentary track, so if you do have a previous release of this, including the previous Scream Factory release, you have seen all of these extras before. You've heard this audio track before, and that audio track really isn't the greatest audio track, but it is done still very, very well. There's a lot of good use of all of your channels, a pretty good amount of bass, the dialogue crisp and clear. You never have to turn the volume up or down when there's a big shot of the score. I think the system does a good enough job adjusting it so you don't have to worry about oh shit, if you're watching this in the middle of the night and it just shoots up, you don't have to worry about that. You can just put your remote down. Everything does come in crisp and clear. It does make good use of the channels. You will hear sound effects coming from different areas of the room, so I did really appreciate that. I just think that, if they were going to give us a new visual upgrade, it would have been cool to get a new audio upgrade as well, possibly like a Dolby Atmos track, but I don't have too many complaints about the audio track. I just would have liked a new one. Now the visuals. This is where the good stuff comes in because you get HDR and Dolby Vision, and this is one of the biggest visual upgrades I have ever seen in my life. I've probably seen The Dead Zone now 10 or 11 times. I've seen it on VHS, I've seen it on DVD, I've seen it on streaming a couple of times because I actually don't own this on Blu-ray. So I've actually never seen a Blu-ray release of this. I've only seen a VHS, DVD, and streaming. And my God, the jump in quality is incredible. Now, when I think of this movie, I think of a very like soft and kind of fuzzy looking film. You know, nothing really pops, mainly because we're in the dead of winter of Toronto. So the colors are just very flat. You wouldn't think of this as a colorful movie. Well, the 4K changes all of that because now all the colors, they're just going to pop off your screen, whether it be like reds, if the kid's wearing a red coat, that stuff is going to be very noticeable. When we're talking to the doctor, you could just notice all the books behind him. Like, you could just see all the colors. Oh, that book is blue, that book is green. You never would have noticed any of this stuff before if it wasn't for this 4K. And then, of course, you know, the HDR and the Dolby Vision, they're going to make the skin look more natural now. You might see, like, a blemish on somebody's head that was never noticed there before. The guy's glasses, you can notice the fingerprints on them. I mean, the attention to detail in this film was just never noticed before until we finally got to 4K. This is what 4K visuals are supposed to look like. This is a 10 out of 10. I mean, this movie has never looked more beautiful as it does now, but they also retained the look of the film. That's one thing that they didn't enhance. They didn't change the whole thing. I watched this movie and then I actually put on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory after it, and I was just looking at that and I'm like, okay, this movie does look like it was filmed in 1971, but they were able to retain the look of that. Meanwhile, The Dead Zone, it's the same thing. You know, sometimes you look at it and you're like, oh, I could step into it. It does feel like 2023, but I also think because the way this movie was shot, the attention to the detail with the clothes and everything, it still does feel like a 1983 movie. It doesn't feel like it was enhanced too much to the point now it doesn't retain the same look of it. No, this is exactly what you're supposed to do with the visuals when you're going to 4K Blu-ray. Retain the look of it while enhancing what needs to be enhanced. Make the color feel fuller, make the blacks look deeper, just make everything look more real and natural, and they nailed it. This is one of Scream Factory's best upgrades to visuals that I have ever seen. If you've seen this film before, it is going to be like getting into a whole new world with this one, and I promise you, you are going to absolutely love the visual upgrade as long as you're a fan of this film. It's a little hard to justify the price of it without an upgrade to the audio and without an upgrade to really the extras other than the commentary track. I know not everybody loves commentary tracks, so that's not going to be a big selling point, but the big selling point is these visuals. These visuals are absolutely stunning, and if you love this film, I can recommend it just on the visual jump alone. Now, as far as everything else, yes, I understand you might be a little bit disappointed, but it's still... They really gave us all the bells and whistles. They didn't leave any stone unturned when it comes to the visuals. There really wasn't a flaw when it comes to the visuals at all. Maybe, at the very, very least, early in the movie, it kind of looks a little bit flatter than the rest of it, but that's more than likely just source material. Everything ends up coming together very well once, you know, he gets in that car accident. I mean, there are points in this movie where I was just blown away by the visuals. I did not expect it for a movie like this. It kind of felt like in this month of December where Scream Factory and Shout Factory are giving us so many releases, and this is coming out the same week as JFK, you would have been forgiven if you would have believed that this movie was just going to be a secondhand Scream or Shout Factory release, but they held nothing back on these visuals. These are some of the best visuals I've ever seen Scream Factory put out, and I really think it's one that you guys should definitely see, and I think you'll really enjoy it. Now, obviously, it's going to come down to how you feel about the film and the price, and it is a little bit highly priced right now, so if you're not a fan of The Dead Zone, I can honestly say hold on to the copy you already have, or just wait for a sale. But if you are a fan of The Dead Zone, and this is one of your favorite Cronenberg films, I promise you, you will not be disappointed. If I was going to give this film and its 4K Blu-ray a score of 1 to 10, I would still give this a really damn solid 9 out of 10. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here with me on another episode of Let's Talk. And if you want to continue to support this channel, the best way to do that is just by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. But if you want to take your support to the next level and you want to become one of our channel producers like Jason Martin and John Doe Juggalo, or one of our channel directors like Kevin Kruger or Frank Rodriguez, you could do that. You could also just become a friend of the channel, but it's no pressure at all. Just look for that link in the description below and pick a tier that is best for you. But after you're done doing all of that, guys, I just want you guys to get out in those streets, maybe in the snow. It is Christmas time, the winter, and just tell all your friends about us. And then we will be seeing you around.